Hello and welcome to another Lord of the Rings online video with me, Balthelion. So today we're going to have a look at the February Executive Producers Letter. So this is something that they tend to do every year, usually in January or February. And they just kind of set up what kind of things you can expect in the year to come, so throughout the calendar year, and what sort of things you can expect in the various quarterly updates and so on and so forth. And having read the short summary of what's included in this year's one, there is quite a lot of interest. So we're going to break this down, go through bit by bit, and see what we think of it, really. So it begins here then. So, greetings. My latest letter to you will focus on our goals for the upcoming year. This is slightly different than just discussing upcoming content and features, and I hope to give everyone a bit more insight into how we want to improve the game. So while this does provide a roadmap for the year, the following letter focuses more on our goals for the game in 2019. So first up, they've broken this down into various like bullet point categories. So the first one is story. First, our most important goal for the year is to continue to tell your ongoing story. We are excited to continue the Black Book of Mordor as it winds throughout Middle-earth and leads players to our next expansion. So expansion confirmed. The tale will take us to the Vale of Anduin, where we will explore the history, important events and secrets of that area, which is interesting. Because at the moment the Vale of Anduin is kind of west of Northern Mirkwood and Ered Mithrin and those kind of parts of the game. And it's kind of east of everything else. It's kind of like northeast of Lothlorien, and there's always been a path that heads northeast that goes up into the fields, the Gladden Fields and that sort of area, but it's where the Bjornings come from. Obviously we haven't got the Bjornings homelands connected to the main landscape. The only way to get there now is if you've got a Bjorning and they have the racial skill that they can go back to Beorn's Lodge. Then that's the only way you can get there. So it'd be nice to link that up, have the Carrock and all that kind of stuff. So it'd be interesting to see how they do that as an expansion though, because there's nothing really there that kind of says like, oh, here's a particular big evil fortress or some kind of like bad enemy that lives up that way. So I guess it's probably going to involve goblins, I would imagine. That's the only kind of thing there. Like goblins and the Bjornings don't get along. There's a kind of a bit of history that way. I suppose. Is it probably a bit too far to get to Mount Gundabad? Could they weave that in there? Maybe. But I don't know. I think they'd keep that back really. It's more of a bigger sort of area. I've lost myself where we are. As the year continues, we will unveil more tales in the Vale and then follow the story back towards Mordor to Minas Morgul itself. Among the many dangers you'll face will be Shelob herself as you learn what she has been up to and how she is influencing the future of Middle-earth. So it sounds like she's up to some shenanigans, which could be interesting, but it's kind of become a bit of a meme really that, you know, Minas Morgul and, you know, the enemies that have fled there and that they've just been sat there chilling for God knows how many years now. And it's like, we could go to Minas Morgul, but let's go to North Mirkwood, and then, you know, let's go out to see the dwarves, and now let's go to the Vales of Anduin, and then let's go back to Shelob and Minas Morgul and all that kind of area. So that's interesting. So next up then, challenge. That leads us to our second goal for the year. Continue to balance the challenge of the game. The question of game difficulty has split our players, with some expressing concern over the difficulty in Mordor and others loving the increased challenge, which is true. I'm personally one of the ones that prefers the harder difficulty of Mordor. It was quite nice. You can also, to a degree, make it more of a self-imposed difficulty as well. For all the hate that the Light of Eärendil got, it does mean that if you want to make stuff harder for yourself, you just equip less gear with light on it, which was nice because I refused to put light gear on until I got to like Talafarui, and that was hell. So it's like, okay, I need to put some light gear on now to mitigate some of this some of the difficulty. So I did quite enjoy that, to be honest. But others don't really like it. Some people outright avoid Mordor. They'd rather just kind of skip it and go straight to Northern Mirkwood and that kind of space. just to get past that and not have to worry about getting gear with light on it, and I can understand that as well. So it's fair to say there's been a split. While we wanted Mordor to be a scary place, we heard your feedback about how difficult the region could be. For the next expansion, our goal is to balance the main storyline with the rest of the game's content rather than stepping up in difficulty. The landscape and normal instances will not have the same increased difficulty that Mordor had. So, things like light requirements. And, you know, increasing the amount of damage that mobs do to you, decreasing your own ability to heal, that kind of stuff. Instead, we'll be looking to introduce optional challenge into the game in some instance content by extending difficulty tiers up to 4. So bearing in mind that, yeah, they've kind of, it's not long really since they introduced tier 3 for some of the new instances. The new tier 3 is basically being a replacement for the tier 2 challenge modes. So it'd be interesting to see how they do that. Now, that could be a bit of a nightmare for them. I'm not sure how long that might last, because you have to think, if you've got to balance each instance 4 times, and they might just apply it to the new instances, and that will make it a bit easier to manage. But if they retroactively apply that to all instances, that would be hell. You'd be at the mercy of various algorithms making your life difficult because they're not going to be able to balance those individually. But yeah, difficulty tiers up to 4 or even higher. God help us. There's probably going to be like some sort of like burrow down survival type thing. It's like, how high can you go in the difficulty before you just can't complete the instance? Players can test their skill with these higher instance tiers and earn increased rewards. We want some solo, free, 6 and 12 character content to have extra tiers of difficulty. Okay, so it is deliberate, they're only planning on certain ones. Tier 4, Tier 5 or even higher. Jesus Christ. Every sentence you make it go even higher. This will allow players looking for more challenge to opt into it, while allowing players who are not interested in more difficulty to play through the story and not be forced to engage in that type of play. In principle, sounds like a good idea. In reality, maybe overreaching a bit, because you know, if you're going to have a situation where people are looking for groups in world chat, they're saying they want to run it on tier 6, so you know, you might need to have the absolute best gear in the game. How many players are going to have that? Not a lot. You know, if you're looking for a pickup group, players are probably going to have poor gear. They're probably going to be less coordinated than if it's a kinship group. Are you going to be spreading the players too thin over too many different tiers per instance? Are you going to end up forcing people to take sub-geared people, or people that are not going to be up to scratch, and everyone's going to wipe and everyone's going to be angry? It sounds like a good idea in principle, having the multiple tiers. I don't know whether it's maybe getting a bit ambitious, putting in like 5, 6 or God knows how many tiers. You know, tier 4, I'd say you're probably better off doing it 1 tier at a time. Just sort of introduce it, see how the player base reacts. If they want more, okay, then let's stick in a tier 5. Then, you know, do it gradually. Don't go crazy putting in like 10 tiers and then no one ever plays them. It's a waste of resources, really. But it'd be interesting to see what they do. The next bit is the one that's kind of got my interest up. So the 64-bit clients. This is something they've been working at for a while now. We are testing our 64-bit Windows client and updating our code so that environments can make better use of graphics memory. Environments particularly like Minas Tirith, which will quite happily use your graphics memory and then some, and then cause you to crash every time you enter or leave that instance. Particularly if you're running on the higher graphics settings. This will allow the client to overcome some restrictions on how the world loads, how textures load, how much we are able to use modern graphics cards. We hope to have a client in beta as early as March. Fantastic. So I've been looking forward to this for some time. Personally, I think this will help massively with a lot of players' issues with the games. You know, whether it's, you know, the slow loading times, the poor frame rates, crashing every time you enter or leave Minas Tirith and places like that. I think this is going to help massively. You know, it's well overdue, to suffice to say, but hopefully they'll get this out. It's probably going to be a little bit buggy itself. You know, it's going to be in a beta phase, but hopefully they can iron that out as soon as possible. And then depending on how they see fit, they might just leave it as a 64-bit only client in the future. Phase out the 32-bit, because probably not many people, if any, are still using a 32-bit client. If you are, God help you. So next up then, we have class balance. So with the recent updates to Minstrel, with an update to Burglar on the way, and god damn it, it needs it, many classes will have received their initial balance pass. Although this is a good start, we want to continue to work on class balance with updates, bug fixes and tweaks throughout the year. We will continue to base that balance work on your initial feedback, in addition to our own internal testing, and we want to improve this feedback process this year and beyond. We have plans for Runekeeper and Captain, though our goal for the future is to be able to add small changes to several classes at a time, rather than implementing a large number of changes for a single class. So this is something that gets said a lot. They always say, yeah, we'd rather do small changes to every class in one go. And it usually happens for a while, and then after a couple of years it ends up being that certain classes just need a major overhaul. And you know, it kind of goes through phases of big class changes versus small class changes. And it's fine, but it's inevitably it ends up shifting the game through various metas that, you know, suddenly like the range DPS is overpowered, so we have to bring loads of range DPS to the class, and then range DPS is too squishy, so we're going to bring some tankier melee DPS. And yeah, you know, it'd be nice to have a more smoother release cadence for the class changes, but it is what it is, I guess. I suppose you can't really criticise too much. Crafting. So one of our goals with the expansion is to add a robust update to crafting, so players can make better use of the system at higher levels. Now this is something that's been a problem with crafting for a long time, because once you get to like Moria and legendary items and such, there's not much point for a lot of the craft professions. You know, if you're an armor crafter, you're probably not going to craft armor, because once you get to Moria and beyond, you're going to be using armor sets at every level cap range. When it comes to legendary items, you know, we've obviously got imbuement now, so you can just continue imbuing the same item rather than having to craft a new item every expansion or update that adds some new legendary items. So you don't have to craft them anymore. But even when you did have to craft legendary items, there's not really much purpose. You craft one item, you're done. There was a bit more use for crafting offhand weapons, so like offhand daggers and such. But beyond that, there wasn't much use for weapon crafting. Obviously, potions and cooking were probably the big main two that had a purpose, which ironically probably have less of a purpose at the lower levels when everything else is useful. Yeah, it'd be nice to see what they can do with that. So what else have they said? We want players to craft exciting, fun and powerful items. Although the system has been updated as players have leveled, we want to make crafting changes that are even more significant and interesting, and give players a way to create better gear as a supplement to other content. It's already a supplement to other content, but maybe what they mean is a viable alternative to other content. So you can craft stuff which will be as good as stuff you might get from a 6-man instance, for example. Probably still not going to be as good as stuff from a raid. I think that's not necessarily unreasonable, because you only need that top tier gear if you are going to be raiding anyway. So remains to be seen what they do with that. We want players to have ways to interact with the crafting system as they play through the content, without making crafting a requirement to play through the story. What do they mean by that? There's not really any places that crafting is a requirement to play through the story that I can think of off the top of my head. There might be something. But yeah, it's kind of very much optional, I'd say, at the minute. There's not really any need for it. Probably the only thing that's really kind of needed for it is maybe the legendary item relics, but that's probably about it. Virtues. One of the things we've been looking into is an update to the virtue system to make it more relevant. So again, yes, this is one of the really old game systems that's in major need of an update. Rather than just increasing the amount of virtue ranks you can earn, they kind of need a good virtue overhaul. I don't know if they've got ideas or whatever, but there's certainly a lot of things they can do to make it relevant, as well as just not just making it scale better into the late game, because it's currently rubbish. The stat bloat's mainly responsible for that. But completely overhauling it, changing what sort of stuff you can get from the virtues, make it something more dynamic rather than just giving pure stats, could be interesting. Then you might see that certain virtues benefit certain classes rather than certain roles, which could be interesting. So rather than the current system where deeds reward virtue points directly, we will shift to a system where completing deeds and possibly other content will reward virtue experience points. Players will be able to choose which virtue advances, whether that virtue is slotted or not. Okay. So is that going to mean you're going to get virtues slower? You might need several deeds completed to unlock one virtue rank. Is it going to be like an experience thing where the higher ranks cost more to rank up, maybe? Rather than just unlocking one virtue per deed completed, which seems like it might be too easy. So I'm guessing they're going to be shifting to a more experience-based system, where the lower ranks will cost less. Characters with existing virtue ranks will be converted to the new system with their virtue level intact. Good, so no one's going to get shafted the moment the system changes over. That's great. Additionally, all virtues will provide small passive benefits to your character, even if they are not slotted. These changes will allow players more choice when earning virtue benefits. Okay. So even if you haven't got a virtue slotted, you can still get some benefits from ranking it up. Could be useful, but it remains to be seen what kind of stuff they get. So there's going to be, rather than just filling out your like 5 or so virtues that you have, maybe you have a couple of ones that you rotate in for certain situations. There will be benefits to ranking up all those other virtues, which currently no one likes because they offer crap stats. So that could be interesting. So next up, kinships. We are looking into more ways for kinships to advance and new rewards for kins to earn as a group. We like the idea of small and large kins advancing, earning cosmetic rewards for their housing and allowing kin leaders to occasionally activate buffs that benefit the entire kinship. Activating these buffs would cost less for smaller kins without compromising the value of maintaining large kinships if that's what players prefer. Okay, so this is kind of something that they're kind of taking out of other MMOs, that you can have various buffs that you can activate for your kinnies. Now, they don't go into what details these buffs would be, but maybe you could have buffs to, you know, it could be minor things. I doubt they're necessarily going to go double down on things like damage and stuff like that, because that could probably be a bit game breaking, and they've been trying to dial back abnormal damage spikes in their recent update. So it could be things like you might get a buff where for an hour or so you might earn more craft XP, or something like that, you know, more experience from handing in quests for the next hour or so, or things like that, you know, things that earn experience, or whatever this new system is where you can earn rewards as a kin. Remains to see what kind of stuff they'll do for that. But it could be interesting. I like the idea that they're going to make it kind of scaled depending on your kinship's size. So smaller kinships will have an easier time of doing this. They'll need to do less things to rank up in this new system. However, the question then is that based on the total number of players in your kinship? Because if you've got a large number of inactive players, is this going to incentivize people to just kick out the inactive people? Rather than, you know, letting them have a 3-month break or whatever and then coming back. Is that going to cause problems like that? Has that been thought of? I don't know, but that's something to consider. Grouping. We want to provide a new instance grouping feature that resembles the existing quest grouping tab on the social panel, which no one uses. This feature will allow you to add up to 5 instances with class and level requirement criteria and possibly others. The goal is to replace the grouping functionality of the instance finder and lessen the need to send frequent LFF chat requests. So nobody uses the instance finder because nobody wanted the instance finder and it was never really up to scratch before. and then new players come in, they try and use the instance finder, no one's in the queue, so they don't get any instances. They complain in world chat that the fact that no one uses it because no one uses it is a bad idea, blah blah blah. So eventually they've decided to do a rework on this. Now, whether it will be viable, I don't know. At the end of the day, you're trying to condition people that have been playing this game for probably, in some cases, you know, since it came out, so well over like 10 years. Are they going to suddenly switch to using this new system? It's got to be fit for purpose. It's got to be rewarding. We'll see how it goes. Legendary server. Amidst all this, we want to make improvements to the game as the players on the legendary servers march forward and we unlock new content on those servers. Players can expect to visit Moria in the near future, not necessarily a fixed date, and we will continue to update the legendary servers throughout the rest of the year. We have a busy year ahead of us and we're excited to continue our journey with all of you. Thank you for reading and thank you for playing The Lord of the Rings Online, Sevelin. So, there's a lot to break down in this. This has probably had more stuff than executive letters in the past, but then the ones in the past have maybe gone into a bit more detail with regards to the new content that's coming out. So all we know is what they've told us at the start of this. Where, yeah, the next expansion will take us to the Vale of Anduin, exploring history, important events and secrets of that area. And then later we're going back to Minas Morgul and dealing with Shelob and that. So that's all we've been told for now. It'd be interesting to see. It could well be like another sort of autumn release, so, you know, like September-ish, give or take. That's traditionally when the expansions have come out. I think, have some of them come out in early summer, or is that just pre-orders I'm thinking of? Probably pre-orders. But yeah, it remains to be seen. It's certainly some promising things that are in here. I'm looking forward to the 64-bit client. Class changes are always nice. It's going to be interesting to see these overhauls they've got down here. So the crafting, the virtues, the kinships, and the grouping overhauls. Quality of life improvements for players, making systems like virtues, which are pretty much irrelevant, not as irrelevant as some systems maybe. But certainly in massive need of an overhaul. It's great to see some love and attention being paid to those. So yeah, it looks pretty promising. So I've let you know my thoughts. It'd be interesting to see what you guys think of this producer's letters. So let me know in the comments what you think. And until next time, I will see you guys later.